And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your marine weather outlook on this Monday, July 17th, 2023. And starting out this Monday afternoon, we have low pressure located over the lower Gulf. It's rather weak, but we still have areas of rain and rain showers wrapping in around this circulation. Further west, there's some brisker winds across the western half of the Aleutians associated with this frontal system that'll continue working its way eastward across the Bering Sea. It will weaken a bit, but bring on shore with it some areas of rain and rain showers. Meanwhile, rain and rain showers will linger upon this decaying occluded front across the Gulf Coast. That'll bring more showers into the Panhandle on Tuesday, and then a little piece of energy and moisture will work its way westward back toward the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, and Anchorage Bowl as we go into Wednesday before the low over the Gulf slips further southward and continues to gradually weaken. We'll also see just a couple of troughs of what was left of that front that came across the Bering Sea. And looking at the sea ice edge, we're at that point in the summer season where the ice just continues to slowly melt there across the far north, with still some areas of ice up there along the Arctic coast offshore. Generally open water, though, through the lower Chukchi Sea in through Kotzebue Sound and the Bering Strait. Looking at the marine forecast for the southeast panhandle Tuesday, winds south-southeast 15 to as high as 20 knots there through Dixon Entrance. Waves 2-3 feet for the inner channels, as high as 4 or 5 feet there around Dixon Entrance, and look for south to southeast winds from off of Craig and Sitka, turning more easterly outside of Yakutat Bay and falling off to 10 knots. Waves generally 5 to 6 feet. Wednesday, look for south winds around 10 knots for the inner channels, with waves running a couple of feet. And winds will be southerly south of Sitka, turning more easterly there from Gustavus off of Yakutat Bay, where waves will run 2 to 3 feet. For the northwestern Gulf, winds will be variable off the Kenai at 10 knots with 4-foot waves. Variable winds at 10 knots with 2-foot waves within Prince William Sound and northern parts of the Cook Inlet. And as we go down Cook Inlet, generally variable winds only around 10 knots and waves running a couple of feet. For Wednesday, variable winds around 10 knots continue at the entrance of Cook Inlet with 3-foot waves, but winds turn southerly as you get north, especially of Anchor Point on up north of Kenai at 15 knots with waves anywhere from 3 to as high as 5 feet. Variable winds continue within Prince William Sound at around 10 knots with waves of 2 feet. And across Kodiak Island on Tuesday, variable wind Shelikof Strait 10 knots. On the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds to 20 knots. West to northwest winds 15 knots on the Bering side, waves generally running 2 to 3 feet either side. And then for Wednesday, aside from the variable winds around Shelikof Strait at 10 knots, look for winds to be northeast to north south of Kodiak Island at 15 to 20 knots. More westerly on the Bering side, 15 to 20 knots down to south of False Pass. Waves 2 to 3 feet on the North Pacific side, 3 to as high as 5 feet there north of Cold Bay. And on the Aleutian chain, Tuesday, strongest winds will be out toward the west there, 30 knots from the south, especially Kiska westward to Shimya. In through the eastern Aleutians, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And for Wednesday, look for west winds. Try to turn back toward the southwest to south across the central Aleutians at 15 to 20 knots. But staying from the south, west of Adak there, at 30 knots, south winds, which will allow waves to build back up to around or above 10 feet west of Adak on Wednesday. Along the southwest coast at Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, waves a couple of feet. And for areas lower Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, look for south to southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. And on Wednesday, winds will be westerly within Bristol Bay at 15 knots, southerly 15 knots within Kuskokwim Bay, and southwest winds along the areas north of Nunavik Island along the Yukon Delta turning southerly at 15 knots into Norton Sound with waves running a few feet there. Strongest winds will be through the Bering Strait, lower Chukchi Sea. Look for southerly winds around 20 to 25 knots with waves of 4 to 5 feet. As we get up along the Arctic coast, kind of a mixed bag of winds, variable directions at 10 knots with waves a couple of feet where you do have some open water. And then on Wednesday, winds are going to turn more easterly along the Arctic coast, southeasterly off of Utqiagvik and Wainwright, some downslope flow at 15 knots. But still, winds through the lower Chukchi Sea and Bering Strait will be southerly around 20 to 25 knots, with waves running 5 to 6 feet down through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence, and generally 5 to 7 feet across the lower Chukchi Sea. So that wraps up your marine weather outlook, and certainly if you are able to get out, be careful out there and enjoy the summertime.